Up until 1865, the institution of human chattel slavery was legal in the United States of America. From 1526, during the early colonial period, it was a practice in what became Britain's colonies and, including the 13 colonies that formed the United States. Under the law, children were born into slavery, and an enslaved person was treated as property that could be bought, sold, or given away. Every part of this process and institution was considered legal under the word of law, from the importation of Africans to the United States up until 1808, to slave owners just flat out raping female African Americans and then selling the children away for profit. I'm looking at you, Thomas Jefferson. And the inhumane treatment and living conditions of slaves was also legal. As we all know, slavery is wrong, racism is wrong, and bigotry of all forms is wrong. One of the most evil institutions in the history of mankind was not only allowed, but legally protected by our government for over a century in certain areas. This one's a bit more opinionated, but let's just jump into it. The Patriot Act was passed in 2001 following the September 11th attacks in New York. You know what those are. The main focus of this bill was to expand surveillance abilities of law enforcement, including the allowance of tapping domestic and international phones, and the ability to indefinitely put any immigrant who the Attorney General believes may cause a terrorist attack into detention camps. The Patriot Act was made as a way to keep citizens safe, but in reality just gave the federal government more leeway to spy on citizens and make the immigration system even more hellish for newcomers looking to create a new life in America. And finally, earlier this year, we read an article called There Is No News from Auschwitz, which tried to convey the idea that reality is often hard to digest and tends to get forgotten by people if not experienced firsthand, in regards to tourists visiting the Auschwitz concentration camp. All of the horrible things done at Auschwitz were not only legal, but directly caused by the Nazi government, as the Holocaust and mass genocide of minorities was spearheaded by no other than Adolf Hitler. You know who that is. The law was abused and created to cause as much pain to these groups as possible, and these acts help prove that just because something is considered legal does not mean that it's moral.
Apartheid in South Africa was legal segregation that implemented a white minority rule compared to the rest of the country being largely, African. Apartheid caused extreme economic, social, and educational inequalities, which resulted in extreme poverty for black, Indian, and color citizens, or mixed race as we would call them regularly in America. This poverty affected the urban communities in harsh ways, leading to terrible living conditions. Apartheid also led to racial profiling by police officers and biased lawyers, kind of like the system was rigged against every non-white citizen. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Trevor Noah actually talks about this in his book Born a Crime, where he describes his harsh treatment from police officers and the prison system during the apartheid era of South Africa, and how he was one of the lucky ones who was able to get his way out of it. Apartheid set back societal progress because it limited the opportunities of, a lot of citizens in South Africa and resulted in large amounts of urban decay. Redlining and wealth gap in black communities. Redlining was the practice of denying financial services such as credit, insurance, healthcare, and mortgage to minorities. Redlining caused black communities to experience decay and become entrapped in poverty. This practice holds society back because it creates unsafe and poor environments for people, withholds them from good economic and educational opportunities, which causes a higher risk of violence and sickness, and causes entire urban areas and the residents to essentially be abandoned and trapped in a cycle meant to harm them. Women nowadays, and especially historically, have been more likely to be oppressed in the workplace by getting lower pay, far less opportunities, and lower chances of employment than their male peers. One example of how this has held society back is the story of the women in Hidden Figures: Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson. These women were extremely intelligent and mathematically gifted, and more qualified than their male coworkers, but their skill level and intelligence was doubted and made fun of because of their sex and the color of their skin. These women were subjected to torment and unfairness that represents how many brilliant women have been held back simply for the sex they were born as, and how that has halted societal, scientific, and literary progress.
Dang, okay. Go off, Parker. Anyway, the Black Panther Party, founded in 1966 by Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton, was rooted in the principles of black power, anti-racism, and Marxist-Leninist thought. Ooh, scary, communist. In response to the ongoing police brutality in Oakland's black communities, the Panthers openly carried firearms while monitoring police conduct, asserting their legal right to self-defense. Gotta love the Second Amendment. Their goal was not senseless violence, but protection, standing against the excessive force and systemic injustice when peaceful efforts had failed. Their armed presence and willingness to confront corrupt authority drew national attention and led FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover to call them the greatest threat to internal security of the country. This militancy sent a powerful message that continued oppression would be met with resistance. By showing that injustice could lead to forceful self-defense, the Black Panthers pressured the federal government to take a broader civil rights movement more seriously. Their actions support the idea that in some situations, the willingness to use violence in defense of rights can become a driving force that compels change and makes lasting peace possible. Oh, say, can you see? Anyway, the American Revolution was an important example of people fighting to maintain peace and create a better society. On July 4th, 1776, a group of men came together to sign the Declaration of Independence, formally declaring the 13 colonies the United States of America. God bless. This act was caused by a list of grievances the colonists had with the British Crown and their overreaching influence in the colonies, making everyday life harder for the average person. Our founding fathers took up arms to protect the American way of life to secure liberty and justice for all. If our founders did not fight back against the British, they would not have given us independence willingly. We had to have asserted our dominance to maintain our way of life, and if not, we'd probably still be subjected to the crown to this day. Earlier this year, we read Elie Wiesel's Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. Wiesel was a Holocaust survivor who lost his family in the camps, including Buchenwald. Why is it worded like that? Who cares? The Holocaust stands as one of the clearest examples of organized evil in human history, a reminder of how far cruelty can go when it is not confronted. In his speech, Wiesel said, "We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim." His words make one thing clear. Refusing to act in the face of injustice only strengthens those who commit it. History supports this. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, Britain and France declared war. That decision led to immense suffering, but failing to respond would have allowed the Nazis' expansion and mass murder to continue unchecked. Without armed resistance, far more people would have been destroyed by the Holocaust and, just the Nazis being Nazis. Peace did not come from ignoring aggression. It came because force was used to stop it. Violence is tragic, and it should never be the first choice. But when all other options fail and innocent lives are at risk, force can become necessary. Peace is not preserved by slogans or silence. It is preserved when those who defend justice are willing to confront it and, if necessary, defeat those who destroy it. Sometimes, the only way to protect peace is to be prepared to fight it, and sometimes put violence 6 feet under.
The current prison industrial complex is designed to have as high profits as possible through high incarceration rates, which also incentivizes recurring inmates. This is achieved by not offering many programs or opportunities for rehabilitation and instead prioritizing corporate gain so that when inmates are released, they are more likely to reoffend and continue the cycle of cash flow. The prison industrial complex requires high incarceration rates because it needs more money, and they don't actually care about creating a safer world, just a world where they can exploit disturbed individuals or people who have made mistakes. Another way that this cycle is achieved is through over-sentencing people for crimes or adding additional charges to an individual's arrest that don't really apply or are exaggerated. The way the prison industrial complex works is that the prison industry tries to make as much money for corporations as possible through government lobbying, meeting arrest quotas, prison labor, and charging prisoners for services such as using the phone or other similar amenities. This is entirely immoral due to the fact that profit is being put over people, both the people inside and outside of the prison cells, because prisons aren't actually designed to cure people or fix them and train them to re-enter society to create a safer environment, but to run a monopoly on crime and violence for maximum corporation profits instead of treating people like people. This, in fact, causes more unsafe environments, more people more likely to reoffend, and overall just destroying communities even further. Because when rehabilitation is put over punishment, it tackles the actual root of the problem and kind of destroys that instead of just treating them like animals and then when they re-enter society expecting them to just be completely fine because prison always works. The C Word in the Hallways is an analytical essay written by Anna Quindlen that recounts 2 separate acts of violence committed by teens. She recounts how both teens were kind of failed by every system they were introduced to help them mentally, and she implores parents, educators, and politicians to make progress for better mental health services. Both of these accounts show how rehabilitative methods and methods to help people would work so much better than just punishing them. Because if these boys were given the proper help they needed, it is way less likely that they would have committed these acts of violence. And this can be said about prisoners and any other one that's like really receiving punishment. Because punishing someone teaches them that their behavior is bad, but it doesn't really fix them. It kind of makes them feel worse and makes them more angry in turn. Rehabilitation offers a way to deal with things and deal with these violent urges that these teens could have prevented, but were not. And this is true in criminal justice as well. Rehabilitation methods teach criminals how to not reoffend and reintegrate in society and give them the mental health help that they need, instead of just locking them in a cell and expecting them to just be fine in 5 years, 10 years, however years they're locked up. And it actually has the opposite effect. It kind of makes them more upset and angry. In 1971, Philip Zimbardo conducted the Stanford Prison Experiment, which was a psychological study held in a basement at Stanford College. The experiment involved a 2-week prison simulation where 24 stable-minded individuals were randomly selected as either a guard or a prisoner. This quickly devolved into extreme madness and chaos, where the people that were given the authority of the guards started belittling, abusing, and becoming sadistic towards the prisoners, and the prisoners resisted. Well, no, they did not resist. They, in fact, did the opposite, where they submitted and kind of just like fell into being abused by these people. And the experiment actually had to get shut down over like in 6 days because it was getting too bad. And this kind of goes to show that if you're given the power and the authority, it doesn't matter who you are, because these are just normal college students. But if you're given the proper authority and power and permission to do bad, you most likely will. And this just kind of goes to show the corruption and how authority like messes with people's minds and kind of just makes them turn evil if they're given the permission to be.
Okay. James Donald Bowman. James David Hamill. James David Vance. He changed his name a lot. Is the incumbent vice president of the United States of America and is serving in this position under President Donald Trump. But before becoming one of Trump's fiercest allies and defenders, Vance sharply criticized the former president. During the 2016 presidential election, Vance wrote that he goes back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical, I can't say that word, like Nixon, who wouldn't be that bad and might even prove useful, or that he's America's Hitler. Vance rose to fame in 2016 following the release of his book Hillbilly Elegy, more like Hillbilly Effigy, which covered his life growing up in poverty and details the violence and drug addiction that often surrounds poor communities in Middle America. In another interview about his book, Vance told a reporter that although his background would have naturally made him a Trump supporter, he says, in quotes, "The reason ultimately that I am not is because I think that Trump is the most raw expression of a massive middle finger pointed at other people." This tone changed, however, when Vance decided to run for Senator of Ohio in 2022. Without Trump's support, Vance would not have had the clout needed to get past the Republican primaries. So, I don't think I can say that. I'm going to bleep that. But, he deleted old tweets from the past that included him calling Trump reprehensible and an idiot. During his cleanup, Vance eventually got Trump's endorsement and went on to win both the primary and the general election in 2022. Vance's personal want for power led to him backtracking on his beliefs in order to obtain respect from those in charge that led to him rising to the vice presidency, where he continues to backtrack on past statements about Trump so he can be more pro-Trump, so he can win the Republican primaries come 2028. Because we all know he wants to be president. Like, we all know.
In Frederick Douglass's autobiography, he accounts for how in slave communities there would be a certain hierarchical struggle between slaves, even though they were all on the same playing field compared to their master. This came in the form mostly of when slaves got permission to go with the master to the big house or like leave with the master and do certain tasks with them outside, they would kind of start being super loyal to the master and kind of turn on the other slaves and like break up slave revolts or like kind of spy on them and report that back to the master himself, which goes to show how if people even are giving a little more power. Yeah, no matter how oppressed they are, they will brag about it. They will turn on other people because it makes them feel more special, even if they really aren't and the master didn't really care about them.
We figured out the writing conclusion, so we're right, you're wrong. Like, comment, subscribe. This video isn't long enough for me to make ad revenue, so cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Give us an A, please. Thank you, Miss Parsons.